Hey everyone, yeah, just taking the time there. I'm gonna move around here. Whoa. I gotta move around a little bit, if you will. But I thought I'd talk about something real quickly. I was watching TV Trash on Daily Motion last night, hosted by Rowdy C, Chris Moore. And he was talking about a series that I did watch as a kid. Not as much, but I did watch it on Saturday mornings. And I did watch the live action version of it during the weekdays along with my sisters because, well, quite frankly, who didn't? And also watched it on NBC because that's who it was associated with at the time. Sorry about that. Just moving something out of the way. But like I said, it was associated with it at the time. And of course I'm talking about Punky Brewster. Now the animated series, of course, was originally named Punky Brewster. But to differentiate from its live action counterpart, it was dubbed It's Punky Brewster. And I think this is where a lot of people have always had problems with animated adaptions or animated versions of live action sitcoms and stuff. You see, back in the 70s and 80s, it was always, I guess, the rage or the thing to do by doing an animated adaptation for Saturday mornings of a popular sitcom. You had, and sometimes the adaptation would be its own interpretation. Like Genie was a direct interpretation, but on a different level of I Dream of Jeannie. That's what it was. It was basically on a different level of I Dream of Jeannie. So even though it had the same premise and all that, it was, like I said, on a different level. And then of course you had other adaptations as well. You had Three Stooges, of course, which were, well, basically they were like living cartoons anyway, so they were good to be adapted, and they were probably one of the best ways to be adapted. But then you take a look at Laverne and Shirley, and you have Laverne and Shirley in the Army, which I guess is supposed to be an animated adaptation and continue, not just a Saturday morning animated adaptation of the sitcom, but also an animated adaptation of not just an adaptation, but also a continuation of a certain episode in the sitcom. Then, of course, you had Fonz and the Happy Days gang, which was done to capitalize on the popularity of Happy Days and the Fonz character. Then, of course, you had Mork and Mindy. Same premise and everything as before. The only addition was a dog with a pet alien dog for Mork, and they were set in a high school. And they were teenagers. That's the only difference. So this was not uncommon. And then of course you had Laverne and Shirley with the Foz and all that. And of course, Fonz also had a dog called Mr. Cool. So again, these are the only, and again, you could kind of see something here, right? Fast forward to 1985 with It's Punky Brewster, as it's become known, and she has something as well. A magical creature called Gloomy, or whatever his name is. Glomer. You kind of see the thing there? Any animated adaptation always had something different about it. Something that you could only get away with in animation. With the Fonz and the Happy Days gang, the one thing they got away with, I was checking something there, the one thing they were able to get away with was the time travel deal. Here you had a girl named Cookie from the future that time traveled with them into different eras of time. Okay, fine. Mork and Mindy was basically the same standard stuff as before, but like I said, with the addition of pet alien dog, And then maybe a few other things as well, like him having a car that's made out of his spaceship. Go figure. You have Laverne and Shirley in one clip that Rowdy used, where they're being marched or ordered to march by a pig. Go figure. I mean, there were certain things that I think the creators of the sitcoms knew that they wanted to do, but the only way they could do certain things is through animation, and that's why you had these animated adaptations. That's why these animated adaptations of live-action sitcoms and shows were done, because you can only do certain things in animation that you couldn't do in live action. Let's not forget, the special effects for television at that time weren't on par as to what they were today, as to what they are today. I mean, technically, today, you could get away with most of all this kind of stuff thanks to special effects. You could. You know, when it came to a show like Punky Brewster's animated cartoon, you know, you could get away with a lot of stuff there too. Give you an example. You have an episode in the second season, I think, says it's entitled "Call Me Miss," and it's basically where Glomer grants Punky her wish, and she becomes a grown-up. You have a episode in the first season called Pretty Ugly, and you basically have her rich friend who I guess wants to get a makeover, or at least get a facial or something to get herself all ready and to go for this big society ball or whatever it is, and she ends up getting a female Glomer face out of it. You have them, of course, going through time as well, and stuff like that. You have Punky getting turned into a mermaid in the season 1 finale. I'm surprised they didn't have Punky or her female friends melt into puddles thanks to Glomer. But the point is, the reason why we've gotten in the past, and probably still to this day do in some ways, but mainly in the 70s and 80s, the reason in the 70s and 80s we got these animated adaptations of live action sitcoms is because they wanted to do things they couldn't do in live action. That's the reason we got them. We didn't get them because, we're basically creating something for the kids, a kiddie version of the sitcom, which it was, don't get me wrong, which was the other main purpose, don't get me wrong, but it was also the fact that they wanted to basically say, we want to do stuff that we can't do in live action. That's the reason. In my opinion, that's the reason. That's why you got the Fonz and the Happy Days Gang cartoon series. You know, because they wanted to do stuff in animation that they couldn't do otherwise. They wanted to do that. You know, they wanted to get away with that stuff. Same with the Punky Brewster cartoon. Same with the Genie cartoon. Same with Laverne and Shirley. In all these animated adaptations, Mork and Mindy, you name it. They wanted to do things with them that could not be done in live action. Now, as great as that sounds, and yes, some of these were very popular, that they were warranted another season. Even if a majority of their episodes in that following season were half episodes, in other words, 11 minutes, they did warrant a second season with enough popularity. But the big problem, though, was the fact that, well, the big problem for a lot of studios, especially networks, was the fact that the live action shows ran longer than the animated ones. And the reason being is because the animated ones could only go so far because of one major problem. The characters, who were voiced mainly at most times by the same people that portrayed them in the live action sitcoms, sometimes they would be moving on to other projects, Or if they were kids, like Sailor Moon Fry, they were growing up and the voices were changing. You know, some of the characters, like let's say Punky's friend Alan, you know, they would grow up so they couldn't remain the same age. I mean, the only way NBC would have continued the Punky Brewster cartoon is to get a younger voice actress who had a similar sounding voice as Sailor Moon Fry. That's the only way. But they couldn't do it. Because they knew fans would know that's not really Punky. That's not their Punky Brewster. So, there was a lot of things that happened, and sometimes it was behind the scenes stuff that really didn't help out. You know, the animated version of Laverne and Shirley, when they teamed up with the Fonz, that got canceled due to the fact that I think the woman that portrayed Shirley or Laverne, I can't think who it was, walked out. They were done. They quit the show. They quit the franchise. They walked out. So they couldn't really finish what they had planned. And again, you know, you had Robin Williams becoming a huge star in his own right, so they couldn't really continue to afford having him under contract to do not just the sitcom, but also do the animated voice. They couldn't afford that. They couldn't continue that. So in the long run, as good as an idea as it is to do animated adaptations of live action sitcoms, because like I said, you can only do certain things in animation you couldn't do in live action at the time due to the fact that the technology wasn't there yet. The other, you know, as good as that all was, as good as the idea as those were, which again was good enough to, I guess, allow them to be warranted second seasons at times. The only bad side of it, the only negative side, was the characters themselves, the actors and actresses that voiced their characters, that voiced the same characters that they portrayed on television, either left due to some behind the scenes conflict. And I was just checking the battery life and time there, but left due to some behind the scenes conflict. Or, in the case of, like, say, someone like Sailor Moon Fry, were starting to grow up and the voices were changing just a bit and their attitudes would change as well. So you couldn't really have what you were going to portray later on in the live action series be portrayed that easily in animation. And everybody knows that when it comes to animation, cartoon characters have to remain young, right? So they knew fans wouldn't fall for something like, oh, let's keep Punky Brewster's cartoon going and going and going. Oh, but wait a minute. This Punky Brewster's older now. What's going on? That's just the thing. So, anyway, like I said, even though back from the 70s to about the mid-80s, even though it was the rage and the thing to do, the reason we got animated adaptations of live-action sitcoms was not just because it was to give us kiddified versions of the sitcoms, which it did, but also it allowed them to do things in animation. But the second thing and main thing was that it allowed them to do things in animation they couldn't do in live action. And that's the truth. Because the technology wasn't there. Yet, if they were to do that today, with today's technology, oh yeah, there would, honestly, you know as well as I do, there would not be any animated adaptations out there because of the technology we have today. But because the technology wasn't there at that time, that's why we had these animated adaptations. Because one, like I said, it did give us a kiddified version of the live action sitcoms, but two, and the main reason, was to give the creators an outlet to do things they couldn't do in live action series. So that's my take on why during the 70s we had animated adaptations of live-action sitcoms. 70s and 80s, that is. So, let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. And I am out.